This time on Grenade Motorsports, we start prepping the 79 F100 for paint. It's gonna be rowdy. I give you the inside scoop on what it's like to be on YouTube for 10 years. We finally get modern suspension on this Dodge Pilot House pickup truck, not to mention a Hemi. Let's go. It's time to go. One of the things I want to get done first is that. This big dent is like, you know, I really should find a tailgate, but again, how much do you think one of those costs? Yeah, too much. So there's also a bit of Bondo here and a little bit down there. But otherwise, the tailgate is good. It's not rusted, it's just beat. So my main concern for today, and it better not take me more than a few hours to get that dent out of there, and there's a couple ways I'm gonna do it. I think the first way is I'm gonna cut it right there, and then I don't know if I'm gonna cut a hole in here and try to heat it and pound it out. I'm not sure yet, but I'll let you know what I did here in a second. Slowly but surely. Yeah, we'll get there. There's a lot of shaping to do. I mean, believe it or not, it's getting better. It's a long way off, and this is a big bow, but I want this mostly good before I drive this down. I'm gonna do that with the door shut. But, I mean, believe it or not, it's not hateful. So you know where I learned how to do this? Fixing two-stroke exhaust pipes, the expansion chambers on a two-stroke dirt bike is real big. And when they get hot, they're a little soft, and when you tip the bike over, drop it in a corner, whatever, they dent, or rocks from the bike ahead of you dents. So you want to fix your pipe every once in a while. You plug off both ends, you put a little compressed air in there, and you heat it up, and metal actually has a memory. So it'll start to push, the air will push the metal out. And if you gently work on the crease, with a bit of heat and a bit of patience, you can actually return the metal darn close to its original condition, which, I mean, with enough time, you probably could get it perfect, but, so that's where I learned to do it. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, I bet I could fix that. Took it as a challenge. I mean, I don't know if you can tell, but that's turning into a tailgate again, where before, you've seen it, you know. So anyway, I'm gonna turn the camera off. We'll check in on this in a couple hours, see where we are. I don't know if I showed on camera or not how I got to the back of that metal. I just cut a chunk out and applied heat and then sort of worked the crease. I've got it now to where I'm gonna just take this I'm gonna use a couple of magnets, position it with a little gap, weld it, then come back around and work this edge to close up the gaps. and weld that on. Once I weld it on, I can grind the weld away, and you'll be able to see it. But it's going to be kind of like the roof on that 58 Apache. Man on a fast horse, you step back, and you ain't going to notice it. Still got a lot of body work to do. This is only a few hours in one day, but I had to save the money. I just couldn't bring myself to buy a tailgate. So I'm almost done with it. It'll be fine. Should be fine. Better. I would call that repaired enough to fill. It's getting there. This is actually day 2, I think. It'll be just fine once I get it all done. We've already picked the color, and that's a surprise. Day 256. Just kidding. Feels like a long time. I mean, sure, it's starting to look like a truck, but look, I haven't even touched in there yet. It's like day 5. Right now it's the beginning of day 5, and that's all I've done. I had one day where I wasn't able to get out here, but still, this is taking forever. And if you ever wondered why paint jobs cost 10, 15 grand, well, this is why. Did you ever have one of those days that feels like it just never ends? It's been about 2 weeks so far, and I got at least another week to go on this. I had to strip that to bare metal because the primer that it had on it had some actual rust underneath, and you can't paint over that, so that's fine. It had a dent anyways, as this whole truck did. It's full of dents, actually. Just because something doesn't have rust in it does not mean that it's an easy paint job. The dents. There were so many dents, and there's still gonna be. Like, this is not gonna be a perfectly flat, smooth truck, but it's a far cry better than it was. It'll be a nice driver quality. A ton of stuff came in for that. I have to get back on that like any day now. I'm confident that it'll look good. I know it runs right. It's gonna drive great. I could tell just by turning it around in the driveway. So, I stripped the doors, all the stuff is off them. These are staying, I'm gonna mask those. I'm gonna mask the dash. I'm gonna lightly hit the bottoms of these and the tops of these with the paint gun when I go to do it. We were gonna change the color to one of those modern shiny grays. Ford has a gray, Audi has a gray, Dodge has a gray, but they want, because it's a popular color, $400 a gallon for the paint. Give me a break. I could mix white and black together and get the same damn shade or close enough. It's ridiculous. So it's actually cheaper. So that's really the reason we're going back to the same color. And I also don't have to sand and spend 2 more weeks on the metal that's inside the truck. Anyways, the camera's going back inside because it gets so dusty in here. I have to open the doors and change the air 3 or 4 times a day. So anyways, back at it. Hang on. This Pilot House Dodge truck is a 52, but we're going to put brand new Mustang 2 suspension underneath it. And the way that we're going to do that is I chose 375-pound front springs, and I chose a front cross member and Mustang 2 setup from Speedway Motors that has all kinds of different choices. But it comes with a power rack and disc brakes, and basically you come over here, you chop all of that off, box in the 2 sides, and weld in the cross member, bolt on the suspension, adapter steering. It's that easy. These shackles, such a simple design actually. They're threaded. It's like a threaded U-bolt that just goes through the frame, and then there's a greased bushing that holds it all together, and it just rides like that. What a simple thing. And it came out really easy too. Somebody serviced this truck in the last 20 years because this grease isn't that old. That's pretty cool. The front's going to be a little more difficult to get down. Sure, I can get this bolt out, but these brackets, I'll probably have to cut them off, honestly. That one's bolted on and riveted. That one is only riveted. How riveting. Anyway, let me get get this out of the way, start cleaning this frame. That cleaned up pretty well. I think it looks good. I do have to box it. And there's these original factory brackets. I don't know if you can see. No. There's these original factory brackets. It's like an additional sister plate, if you will, that went right in there on both sides. I'm gonna, because they're all dirty and they were there to begin with and they're attached with rivets to the cab mount, I'm going to put bolts in all those holes and cinch them up tight. And that'll help that. And then I'll box it in, which it'll be super burly. And I need to mock up the cross member and get my center. Then I'll know exactly how big to make my boxing pieces. So I'm going to lift this. I'm going to lift that and get it lower to the ground so it's easier to manipulate when I start mocking up all of this cool stuff. Tubular control arms. I just like saying the word tubular. It's like totally tubular. That's a thing from the 80s. If you don't know what that is, too bad, you missed out. See, that makes it a lot better. Suspension components, we're holding these plates on, and when you take them off, that plate no longer is attached to the front of the frame. It's sort of attached to the mounts and the back of the frame, but really, especially since we're putting in a lot more horsepower and torque, I wanted to make sure those plates were, again, doing their job, which is stiffening the frame in this highly perforated area. And then obviously I'm gonna box this whole section. I've got some 3/16 sheet steel over there that I gotta make some patterns and do some grinding, so that's gonna take a while. I'll catch up with you here in a jiffy. First plate, and I'll get that one next. Let's get it welded. All right, I got the front end on the Dodge. I'm not even sure if I filmed that, so let me go over there and double check. And I now have the brake booster replaced, and I've got the voltage regulator wired properly, so I now have a properly charging alternator, and I have proper brakes, which means I could drive this. The only problem is, number one, the bodywork. I don't really want to get it soaking wet, although it did sit outside for 3 days in the snow. Speaking of which, it's probably too dark. You probably can't even see, but it's freezing cold, super cold. I mean, like, I think it's 5 degrees or something. But yeah, this is ready to go, ready to weld. I'm not sure where I left off, so if I'm repeating myself, that's tough. I'll fix it in editing. Okay, the next thing I need to do is put this engine back inside of there and start fabbing up the mounts, because that is where it lives. That's not going anywhere. I have struts put in where the springs go so that when the bearings show up, they shipped me the wrong bearings. When those show up, I can set this down on its wheels, and with an engine in it, you can move it around, and then we can spin it around and start working on the rear, because we have a Ford Ranger rear end going in there. So this thing will be all modern. It'll be sweet. Got the steering column mocked up in there. It's definitely not in the right place. It needs to go that way, because otherwise you'd have a brake on one side of the column and the gas on the other, and you can't cross to get your foot on there, so that's a no-go. So I gotta move the steering wheel over and put both pedals side by side like in a normal car. These cabs are tight. A lot of people will extend these cabs and do all sorts of nonsense. We're not doing that. We're just gonna make room, whatever means necessary. The fuel tank was a giant pain. It was full of 12 gallons of stinky fuel, which fortunately I'm going to give it to my hillbilly buddy. I don't know what he's going to do with it, and I don't care. But there you go. There's the new tank. It's going to go right in the same place, keeping the same filler location. So that'll be cool. Oh, and an interesting thing that I found underneath the seat of this truck. It's right here. This is an air hose. Looks to be fairly long. And inside of this container, this appears to be from Sears, which are no longer in existence. Sears and Roebuck Company. I'm sure everybody around our age or even younger knows them. But what you have here is, it's basically a set of spark plug adapters. So you take out a spark plug and then you put this in it, leaving one of your cylinders not firing, using it as a compressor. So with the engine pumping up and down, every time it has a compression stroke, it's going to put air in your tire. And I thought that was amazing. I've never seen such a thing. I didn't know it existed, but it does exist, and I think it's fantastic. I would never use it, of course. I mean, I guess in a pinch it works, or if you're out in the middle of nowhere, or you don't have a 12-volt vehicle with an external compressor. I don't know. But somebody thought enough of it to manufacture these and put them in cars. Maybe it helps in a pinch. I don't know, but yeah, it's strange, it's old, it's cool. Kind of like these trucks and me. Here we have an interesting development, and by interesting I mean sort of a pain in the butt, because if you see that oil pan down there, it's just right above the steering rack, and it needs to go back another 10 inches or so to clear and drop down into the front, which would be lovely in a perfect world. You cannot go that far back, because if you did, and actually it's more like 8 inches or so. Yeah, it's more like about 8 inches. So if you took and moved the entire thing back 8 inches, you would basically have, the firewall would be about here. Which means we would have to take out his spare ribs for $100. We'd have to take this firewall out, which I think we're gonna have to do anyway. Because even if I keep that high down there and keep this right about here, I still need to pull this back 3 or 4 inches. And that's no big deal. I can make that look nice from the inside. But it definitely does not fit as well with the Mustang 2 suspension. Now they sell a different oil pan that has the sump or the deep pocket, the pickup pocket, not here, but here. However, it's 9 inches long, which you only gain about 2 inches, and you gain it on the front side. You don't gain it on the back. I even checked for a front sump. I don't know if they have that, but that's really not going to gain us anything either. You might as well just stay high, which we can level it out and stay high. There's enough room underneath the hood, but I want low center of gravity if I can get it. So I need to do some thinking, a bit of measuring, and definitely a bit of cutting. The firewall definitely has to be trimmed no matter what we do, whether we keep that oil pan or get a different one. But I absolutely need to hollow it out a bit. So hang on one second, let's see how that worked. This morning's goal is going to be motor mounts. This engine and trans are sitting where I believe within an inch of where they're going to live. I want to make motor mounts so that I can at least fab them up, get them, mocked into place, pull the engine and trans out, finish welding all of these pieces, finish the motor mounts, then I can put this in once and for all. When this is in once and for all, then I can build the doghouse or the back of the firewall and begin to position the pedals, because the pedals are very crucial and they're kind of right where the end of this cylinder head is. So I want to make sure all that's right, and that you can service this engine, change the plugs without having to go in there. Because it is pretty far back, and I've checked into other oil pans that will allow this to come forward, but for $500 you can get an 1.5 inches, and you know what? That's cool. We're going to make that work. The 4-wheel drive Durangos have a different mount. They bolt to the third member. They bolt to the center of the axle on the 4-wheel drive, so they're different. But what I was going to do is just use both of these and basically build ears that hold it and capture it. But I couldn't do that. I can use one short one over there and build ears and capture it. But the other one's in the way of the steering. So what I did to alleviate that is I took this mount, which is a Toyota Camry V6 engine mount, and I made my own plate. I pre-marked it, welded it on, so now this will sit in there like this, and I'll capture this one and it clears where the steering goes. So that's what I've just done. It only took, I don't know, longer than fairly quick, 1, 2, 3, got it handled. So this will get bolted in, I'll put ears, I'll bolt that one on, put ears, then I can take the engine out and finish welding all this stuff. I gotta go buy welding gas. I didn't do that yet. Okay, I got the motor mount plates tacked into place, and I'll be able to pull the engine out and weld everything up good and solid, and then mount it for the last final time, and I'll build the doghouse. I'm not sure where I left off in filming because it's been several days, and we just had a really cool visit from some guys I used to ride bikes with back when we were 13, 14, we were kids. They came out and stayed a few days. It was great. But back to this. I have my motor mount plates in place. I have to gusset them. I have to finish welding everything. I'm going to make that tunnel. The engine will bolt right into those mounts, and then I can build the tunnel. I have some bearings that were delivered incorrectly that are on the way, and also the short tie rods. Those are on the way. Should be here any day. The rear end from the Ford Ranger, that, I don't know if I mentioned, I don't really like the condition of the housing. There are others available. I may go searching for them next week. I'm not sure where I left off in filming, but I know I've shown some of this. But I don't think I've shown it like this, where everything is welded, everything is secure and ready to bolt in. So that took quite a while, as you might imagine. I'm super pumped. It looks great. All these parts are going to be sweet. Once I get this engine bolted in, which I'm doing right now, I'm going to start to assemble some of the suspension components and get the engine bolted in. And then I can start looking at fabbing the trans mount and hopefully putting the fuel tank in it. We've got this engine sitting on mounts now, sitting on isolated rubber mounts. That's a factory one, and that's one off of a V6 Toyota. But you can get to the oil filter, the oil pan clears. Yeah, I think I'm done with the engine hoist, which means I can fab up the tranny mount and put the tank in. Ooh, we're getting there. Oh, suspension. I can now compress the coil springs because the coil spring rate is less than the total combined weight of what we have in here right now. So I'll be able to put a safety chain on it and compress the spring with a floor jack, hopefully. Now, I didn't film any of that because I was concentrating. You basically have to chain that coil spring to the cross member so that it doesn't try to escape and go across the room and or kill you. Because when they're brand new and they're stiff springs and the truck isn't assembled, they're not real super easy to put in. And I may have been swearing, so that doesn't help my channel grow if I'm cussing and fighting. So whatever, they're in. I'm going to do the rack now. Every once in a while, I like to put the thing on its wheels, you know. Number one, I can roll it out of the garage and clean and then put it back in. So this one is just about ready to put on its wheels, and I'm excited about that because I don't know if you remember what that suspension looked like when we took it out of there, but it was a straight axle with leaf springs and a boat anchor of a tiny little underpowered lump of steel that I'm glad is not in my way anymore, because now you have what's called creative freedom, and I'm really happy about the way the motor mount came out and the way the steering column clears the exhaust. And I do believe, not 100% sure, but I do believe there's room for stock headers, meaning you could put 5.7 long tubes or even shorties on this engine later, should you decide to put a cam and, you know, make it gnarly. But this is one of the non-MDS, so it doesn't ever drop cylinders. That's what I like about these older engines. They're roller motors and they're fairly simple, but I want to get this down on the ground so I can move it around and take a couple pictures of it. I think it'd be great. I'm super pumped. Today was reasonably productive. Ta-da! Look at that! We have suspension and brake rotors and tie rod ends and all the other bits that we're missing. Here, see if I can get on this thing. It does things. Pretty soon it's going to do noisy things. I'm excited. This month marks the 10th year that I've officially had a YouTube channel. February 2025 marks actually 10 years of putting out videos and documenting all the builds that have been going on in my life at that time. I actually had a YouTube channel prior to that, but it was more of a trial. I was checking to see what I could do and how I was on camera. At first I was very, very unnatural on camera. I mean, like really bad. And it just takes a little switch of mindset, you know, and you become comfortable whether there's cameras on or not, you're yourself. An interesting thing has been taking place in the YouTube world, at least in the car segment. A lot of the stuff that I watch, you watch. The interesting thing that's occurring is with the end of Motor Trend, there's content out there and whatever, but the creators that fueled this genre of car shows or you know, car build channels, those creators have begun to realize, and I've been listening to them talk, that the whole television show production thing where you're like, hurry up, make a video every week, get it out, get it published, make sure there's a payoff, the thing runs or drives or it jumps, whatever it does by the end of the week at this just neck break pace. Is really not sustainable. And that's another word that you're hearing a lot. It just isn't sustainable. Being viral, getting 50 million views or even 100,000 views, whatever it is for you, that isn't sustainable. That's not one of those things that you can maintain unless you have, exploding dog poo bags, and even then that's going to run out after a few months or a few years. As soon as people swipe down to the next thing, their brain's off, and but that's not who watches this channel. That's not who watches those car channels. However, being viral, going super big on the internet is not long-term sustainable. What I do is sustainable. It doesn't pay anything, but it's sustainable because I just do what I do. I'm going to do it anyways, so I might as well film it. I might as well leave the camera on whenever possible. It's sort of like, sitting down and playing your guitar or singing a song that you really like. It's just something that you feel good when you do it. So that's why I've made 10 years still doing it. I've tried many different things. I tried to, make it big and all of that. And I even dabbed my feet in the water of professional television for 2 seconds. But the reason I bring all that up, these guys realize they can't keep doing it exactly this way. Their personal lives start to take a hit, their health, their money. So it's just one of those things that everything develops as it should. Everything starts to unfold in the way that it should. And I stand firm believing that I just do what I do, and I hope it's enough. Years ago, racing motocross, I used to get on the gate and I'd be all nervous and worried, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm going to do exactly what I do on practice. I'm just going to do what I do and hope it's enough and see where it ends up. And that's what's happening with this channel. It's at 10 years. I looked at it and was like, 10 years? Wow. It goes by fast. And do I have another 10 in me? Well, sure. I mean, I'm going to be doing it anyways, so I might as well film it. When people talk about subscriber count and view count, how many people watched it, and did it earn revenue, and when you're hyper focused on that stuff, you tend to lose sight of the real reason that you do it. And the real reason that you do it is, while you may not get 50,000 views per video, hell, my average is around 1,000. I've had a few 300,000 views videos. I think one of them's even up to 600,000 views over the course of 8-9 years, whatever it is. But when you're focused on those view counts and those subscriber counts, you start to muddy the waters of what it is you're trying to accomplish. The way I look at it is, every single view, whether it's 5 views, 5,000, 500, whatever it is, every one of those views is a person. And that person chose to take a look at what it is you're doing, and they may or may not come back and watch more. They might have seen all the ones prior. But that one person, that one click, each click count is a human. And they're there to see what you're doing, and if something strikes them as important, that means that they are so glad and so thrilled that you did that one thing, whatever it is you do on your channel. They're glad you did that one thing, and for them it makes a difference, and they're somehow slightly enriched, whether they chuckled or whether they're interested in the scenery or whatever the reason is that that person hit that button. That's why we do it. When you're searching for truth through art, which is effectively what this is, it's just an art form. When you're searching for truth through art, you can't shortcut your vision based on the number of people that are looking at it. You still have to create the song even though no one will hear it. You still build the thing because it gives you this sense of self-satisfaction. And that's really the real reason that I do the channel. That's why I'm going to keep doing it. 10 years, that's a long time. It went by in a flash. The kids are grown. There's just been so many cool things. I'm going to keep doing it. I just wanted to touch on that 10-year thing and get back to building. I know I have tons of work to do on this. The fuel tank needs to go in. That Ford over there, that has to be sanded 3 different times. I got to hit it with 200, 400, and 600. Then I can mask it build a paint booth in here out of rags and dreams. But yeah, let's get back to the work. I'm gonna get this column mounted inside the truck. There's like a floor plate and a dash plate. Basically, you just mount these. I'm gonna probably weld them on. But once they're in, it'll hold the column, and then you can line up from here to the rack. So let me get this mounted, and we'll see what it takes on the front of the engine. With the column now mocked into place, I can put the adapter on, check the position of the wheel, the controls, you know, the levers, and make sure that this is the spot I want. If everything works, then I can go ahead and lock it in, put bolts in here and make it permanent, then connect the steering shaft. But I have to make sure that, you know, the lever doesn't hit your knuckles, that the wheel does what it's supposed to and everything before I lock it in permanent and cut the shaft that goes between the column and the rack. So right now I'm just gonna test this stuff and see how it goes. Did I get it? Yeah. Yeah, it's just right when you think you've had enough and you're about to throw something, you just go, yeah, sometimes it's like that. And what you end up doing is you just calm down and go, well, and a lot of it has to do with expectation. You get mad because you expect it's a simple procedure. If you assume that everything is a complicated procedure, then you're not upset when it takes longer than you thought it should have in the first place. You just go, yeah, they're tough sometimes. But after, you know, 15 years of doing it, 20 years, my whole life, you just go, yeah, sometimes you have to do it a few times. But I dig it. That's tilt all the way up. That'll be down while you're driving. Cool. It's a lot harder to operate when you don't have a steering wheel to hold on to. And also, none of this is really permanent yet. I gotta put bolts in there. Those are just screws holding it so I can get it dialed in. If I like this, then I'll make it permanent. Cool. I moved it around a couple of times, but I got plenty of room. I had to keep it over this way as far as I could because I need the pedal space. But tilt, park, reverse, neutral, drive, 2, 1, turn signals. It's not canceling. It doesn't self-cancel the turn signals, but I looked very closely at it, and it has to do with the springs. Everything is so new that it's tight in there, and I've sprayed it up and done what I could. So what I think, as it wears, it will eventually self-cancel because you have to push on it. This little contactor plate has to push on these springs so hard that it's just going right past them. So I think it'll wear in over time, but it's good. It looks great. It's so cool. It's fitting, actually. It's got that hot rod vibe, you know. Yeah, it's cool. Sort of. Oh, I even got the horn button. I'm sort of bummed it's all fingerprinty, but it's cool. I just like stuff. Cool. All right, I gotta go get all that anchored down there. That's the first time that I've connected the column to the rack. I don't know where the rack is in position, like how many turns, and I have these tie rod ends just loosely connected because you have to start somewhere. Now that it's connected, I'm gonna rotate the wheel and see how far off I am. As far as like, if the rack was halfway that way, it's only gonna turn a little bit like this or a little bit like that. This is the beginning of it. I'll get it centered first, adjust the tie rods, then dial in the steering wheel, make sure this turns the way I like it. Sometimes you have to add a third U-joint to make it buttery. And also keep in mind, when you turn this, there's going to be some load, because what's holding the ball joints together are the nuts on the end, and they're taper fit, but they're working against this spring. So this spring is forcing the steering. These aren't easy to steer unless you have power assist. That system was designed that way, and they do have a manual rack, but that's a whole other story. I have this ratchet strap on here because I don't have the other foot to this clamp welded to anything, because I have to build this trans tunnel or doghouse yet. So let me just see if we got steering. Well, we definitely have steering. And that's not bad, actually. I don't know what it looks like. I'll have to go look at it. But I feel like I'm pretty close to in between. Yeah, that's not terrible. We can dial all that in better. But yeah, as long as that wasn't doing anything crazy, it feels smooth enough. When you put power to it, it's going to be buttery. Cool. Dig it. Not sure. This is a big giant hammer for pounding things. I'm not sure if you can see, but you know what that is? That's a brake pedal and power brake booster and the master cylinder. Starting to get my bracketry laid out for the proportioning valve. You're going to be able to dial out your back brakes so you can sit there and do a one-legged burnout. Or if you put posi later, it'll do a two-legged burnout, but I'm pretty stoked. I just went out back and got the accelerator pedal, the drive-by-wire accelerator pedal out of the Durango that this came out of. And there was some concern, you know, when you're in these trucks, it's such a small space. And fortunately, my buddy has shorter legs from here to the ground than I do, because this is actually ridiculous. I would like to have the whole floor dropped about 5 inches, would just make things really, really nice. But because he fits in here better than I do, this is gonna work really good. The actual brake pedal will mount just to the right of the arm, so it's perfect. And then the accelerator is gonna go right there, and there's gonna be a little tunnel to rest your foot on so you can drive it with your toe. But I mean, basically this is gonna go right there. And it's just excellent. I mean, I swear, when I first, decided to do this one, I was like, man, I don't know if that is gonna fit in there with that, and is this gonna, there was so much unknown. And now that I'm seeing basically the hard parts, all the hard parts are done. The motor's on mounts, the tranny's mounted, the front suspension's in and steering. Obviously brakes are simple, wiring is time consuming, but it's basically simple. The harness will be here in a couple weeks. I'm pretty excited. I'm really happy actually that worked. I didn't know what I was gonna do. I'm glad it worked out. So, awesome. That's about it for today. In a few seconds it'll be tomorrow, and I'm gonna start building the cage that goes around this. And by cage, I just mean framework that's going to hold the sheet metal that I'll be able to insulate. And obviously, I'm going to custom make each piece, so that it is tight. And I'm only going to use the room to insulate and to operate this pedal. So I'm excited, man. This just worked out really good. Hang on a second. I just need to change this angle, clean that up, and I can weld this in and then build off of it. And it will be right exactly where you want it. And I'm leaving room for some insulation because this is absolutely not going to be cold while it's running. and we're content. We can make this happen. Tilt. Ignition. Not yet, huh? Drive. Wide open. Brakes. Wide open. So there you go. That's a trans tunnel, or doghouse, or bulkhead, or firewall, whatever you want to call it. It's not done from the front, obviously, but it's getting there. The next thing I'm going to do is basically patch this floor a little bit. Just kind of patch it. You got to know where to stop. And believe me, this isn't a total restoration. This is to make it a driver and to have fun with it and make it safe and reliable. So that's what my goals are. But I'm going to patch up the floor, seam seal that, and then I'll work on the front. Oh, so there you go. Now we have a floor. I'm just going to put the pedals in, let that fully dry, and it can be carpeted, insulated and carpeted. It is going to need some of that sound deadener put over the whole thing. It'll look great once you do that. Yeah, I think it'll be totally good. But we're now ready for sound deadener. I have pedals and I have the doghouse built. It's super exciting. It's very sturdy. And then once I get this side completed and insulated, it'll be just fine. Everything clears, you'll be able to service the engine. It's all good. That's where we're going to have to leave it for this week, folks. Be sure to come on back and check out the almost 200 other videos we have available on Grenade Motorsports YouTube. There's a lot of cool stuff here. Thanks. I'll see you soon.